15 action films that were released under fake studio names. We all remember the rush, the explosions, the stunts, the grit of a good action movie. But what if the studio that released your favorite adrenaline-fueled film never actually existed? Behind the high-octane chaos and slow-motion shootouts, there's a quieter story, one the credits don't tell. It's the story of phantom studios, film companies that appear from nowhere, release a single film, then vanish without a trace. No registration, no filmography, no office. Sometimes not even a phone number. These weren't just amateur bootlegs or passion projects lost in obscurity. Many of these films had real budgets, real actors, and were released in theaters or on VHS shelves across the world. But the companies behind them? Fabricated, invented, ghosts. Why would anyone do that? The answers are murky and more than a little suspicious. Sometimes, a fake studio was used to dodge taxes or avoid a lawsuit. Other times, it was to protect a major distributor from public embarrassment. And in rare cases, these phantom studios served as dumping grounds, a final resting place for films deemed too bad to carry the logo. The strangest part? Some of these movies developed cult followings. Viewers kept asking, who made this? But when they tried to trace the logo on the VHS box, they hit a dead end. These are not just forgotten action flicks. They are buried operations, surrounded by deliberate obfuscation, fake names, and vanished paper trails. So, buckle in. Because we're diving into 15 action movies released by studios that technically never existed. And once you see how deep this rabbit hole goes, you might never trust a logo again. Fact 1. Quiet Fire o mia noa sute noazech. It was 1991, and the VHS action market was hungry for the next underground hit. Quiet Fire, starring Robert Z'Dar, a cult icon with a jawline carved in stone, seemed like the perfect candidate. Gritty, explosive, filled with low-budget bravado, it had all the makings of a rental store classic. But when curious fans tried to trace its production roots, they found nothing. The studio credited on the box, American Video Communications, didn't exist in any registered corporate database. No prior films, no staff listings, no press releases. It was as if the company had been invented for the sole purpose of releasing Quiet Fire, and then erased from existence. Some speculated it was a tax shelter project. Others believed it was a shell company designed to protect the true investors, who perhaps didn't want their names associated with a film where the lead hero lights a man on fire in a motel bathtub. But the real question wasn't just who made it, it was why hide it at all. What made this even stranger was the film's tone. For all its budgetary constraints, it took itself seriously. It wanted to be a message film wrapped in an action shell. Was that the reason the backers stayed hidden? In the end, Quiet Fire lived up to its name, a loud, violent movie released in near silence by a phantom entity. And the moment it hit the shelves, the studio behind it disappeared without a trace. But this wasn't an isolated case. Far from it. Fact R. Blood Ring Ichojoyi. You might never have heard of Blood Ring. And if you have, it's likely because you stumbled across a battered VHS copy in some long-forgotten bin. A gritty underground martial arts movie shot in the Philippines. It blended American brawlers with Southeast Asian choreography in a way that felt both chaotic and strangely hypnotic. But it wasn't the plot or the fight scenes that raised eyebrows, it was the logo. A film by Filmark International. The problem? Filmark International didn't exist, at least not in any official sense. Unlike other phantom studios that might leave behind some digital footprint, Filmark International's logo appeared once at the film's opening and was never seen again. It was a production ghost, drifting through the VHS market with no backstory, no catalog, no follow-up. Digging deeper, some VHS collectors unearthed conflicting tapes. Some had Blood Ring labeled under a different company altogether. Was it rebranded? Reacquired? Or did the original company never exist in the first place? Rumors began to circulate that Blood Ring was part of a loose network of martial arts films released by fly-by-night distributors trying to capitalize on the video store boom. These studios were little more than borrowed P.O. boxes and post-production freelancers designed to produce one film, make a quick sale, and vanish. Blood Ring didn't just vanish, it fragmented. It exists in several versions, under several labels, each with inconsistent runtime and dubbing. The only constant, That mysterious studio name no one could confirm or deny. It wasn't just the action on screen that was fabricated, it was the entire infrastructure behind it. Fact hash 3. Angel of Destruction, 1994. Angel of Destruction had everything. An early 90 seconds action film needed gunplay, revenge, an undercover cop with a dark past, and more slow motion than story. Starring Maria Ford, the film was packaged for fans of lethal lady thrillers, a niche that thrived on low budgets and high body counts. But while the film found modest success in direct-to-video circles, the production company behind it, Amcell Entertainment, did not. In fact, no one could prove it ever existed. Unlike other indie studios, Amcell had no previous credits, no offices, no press kits, and no future releases. Not even a P.O. box. It appeared, quite literally, for one film and then disappeared. Why invent a company for a single project? Industry insiders speculated that Angel of Destruction was picked up after a larger studio passed on it. Releasing it under a fake studio allowed the real distributor to profit from the market without publicly tying their name to the film. Others believe Amcell was just a front created to give a veneer of legitimacy for international sales. Ironically, the film's tagline was, "She had nothing to lose." Neither, apparently, did the people who released it. In retrospect, Angel of Destruction wasn't just pulp, it was a test case in market manipulation. It showed how easy it was, in the pre-internet age, to fabricate a company and insert it into the cinematic bloodstream. The film lives on in cult corners of action fandom. But the studio? That name might as well have been fiction. Fact C. Terminal Rush. 18 Dujo Licks. In the mid-90 seconds, Terminal Rush had all the hallmarks of a low-tier action gem. Helicopters, terrorists, and a hydroelectric dam under siege. Starring the ever-intense Don the Dragon Wilson, it promised high stakes on a modest budget. But the most explosive thing about the film wasn't the action, it was the name on the VHS sleeve. Listed as being released by Avalon Releasing, the film's U.S. distribution looked standard until people started asking questions. Avalon had no other credits, no distribution network, no legal filings, no studio address. It existed only on Terminal Rush's packaging. And then came the twist. Independent sleuths traced Avalon back to a now-defunct P.O. box, connected to a shell company owned by a minor subsidiary of a major film group, one that had a reputation for quietly dumping films it didn't want to claim. Insiders speculated Terminal Rush had been made under a standard production deal but performed so poorly in test screenings that the studio chose to scrub its name from the release. Instead, they created a disposable label Avalon to quietly ship the film out to home video without reputational damage. The result? A film that felt like a disowned child, technically released, but never acknowledged. To this day, Terminal Rush continues to circulate in collector circles, its phantom distributor more talked about than the plot itself. The dam may have held, but the studio's identity collapsed without a sound. Fact hash 5. The Protector. 1985. Hong Kong cut. You might think you know The Protector, Jackie Chan's first serious attempt to break into the American market. Directed by James Glickenhaus, it was a grimy, violent departure from Jackie's signature style. The U.S. version bombed, both critically and commercially. But in Hong Kong, a different version emerged, cut, re-edited, and released under a studio name few had ever heard of. This wasn't just regional rebranding. The Hong Kong cut featured new scenes shot by Jackie himself, a completely different tone, and most intriguingly, a distribution credit that didn't link back to any official Hong Kong studio. The studio listed, Jade Cinema Limited, had no presence in the industry before or after, no company registry entry, no business trail. It was a cinematic mirage used solely to release Jackie's version domestically, distancing it from the American flop. Why hide the studio's real identity? Some believe it was a legal loophole. Others think it was pride. Jackie wanted to wash his hands of the Glickenhaus version and create something his fans would actually respect without being legally tied to the original production company. In the end, The Protector exists in two forms, one loud and clumsy, released under Warner Brothers, and one lean and local, backed by a ghost. It's one of the rare cases where the same film was disowned on both sides of the ocean. Fact look. Final impact. 18 R. Final Impact sold itself as the spiritual cousin of Kickboxer, a down-and-dirty underground fight film set in Las Vegas. It had all the hallmarks: a disgraced fighter, a rising protege, blood on the mat, and just enough melodrama to string the punches together. But what it didn't have was a real studio. The logo at the start read, Overseas Film Group, which, to casual viewers, sounded legitimate. But dig deeper, and the story gets muddy. There was an Overseas Film Group registered in the US, but it had no record of handling Final Impact. The name was real, but the connection wasn't. According to former crew members, the name was used without authorization, a case of brand laundering. The actual production company was a skeletal team operating out of a rented office, with no permanent employees and no legal clearance to use the name they plastered on the film. The motive? Legitimacy. A fake association with a real-sounding name helped secure international deals and shelf space in overseas video stores. What's more bizarre is that the film ended up being a minor VHS hit in several territories, leading to sequels distributed by entirely different companies. But the original's Overseas Film Group credit remains an artifact of bold deception, a forged stamp of approval in an era before Google could fact-check your label. In the world of fake studios, Final Impact didn't just bend the rules, it used someone else's name to break them. Fact 2. Rage 1995. Rage is the kind of film you'd expect to find in a midnight action marathon. Gary Daniels plays a mild-mannered teacher who becomes the target of a government experiment gone rogue classic, 90 seconds mayhem with car chases, shootouts, and reckless science fiction tropes. But what most people missed buried beneath the broken glass and explosions was the mystery behind its release. The film was distributed by Royal Oaks Entertainment, a company that, on paper, looked busy. Multiple credits, a logo, even a hotline number at one point. But none of it held up. Investigations by collectors and niche film historians found that Royal Oaks was a phantom label, appearing only when films needed a quick and discreet path to VHS. It wasn't a studio, it was a rotating alias, a rubber stamp for projects that were too volatile, too cheap, or too odd for mainstream distribution. In the case of Rage, rumors suggest it was originally produced under a different title and shelved after test screenings. When another distributor passed, Royal Oaks became The Solution, a fake coat of paint to make the film look like it belonged somewhere. But the most telling clue? Royal Oaks had no permanent address. Every project used a different contact point. And no one, to this day, has come forward as its founder. The film's plot was about erasing identity. Its distribution followed suit. Fact ba LA Wars, 1994. Everything about LA Wars screamed exploitation. Gangland shootouts, cheap suits, and one-liner vengeance. It was a love letter to 80 seconds cop thrillers, drenched in testosterone and machine gun fire. But while the film proudly displayed its chaos, the company that released it stayed suspiciously quiet. The opening credits named PM Entertainment as the distributor. But closer inspection revealed something odd. This version of PM Entertainment wasn't the same entity behind other known titles like The Sweeper or Riot. The logo design was different. The address listed in paperwork led nowhere, and the registered copyright line referred to a variant spelling of the company name. The theory? Someone hijacked the identity of a real B-movie studio, tweaking just enough to appear legit while remaining separate. In effect, L.A. Wars was released by a fake version of a real company, a shadow operation that piggybacked on PM's reputation without any of its legal liabilities. When asked in later interviews, actors from the film admitted they never met anyone from the supposed distribution team. The production wrapped, a deal was signed, and then nothing. No calls. No premiere. Just a VHS release under a name nobody could trace. Today, LA Wars exists in a weird twilight zone, remembered for its over-the-top violence, but rarely questioned for its suspicious release. The real crime might have been off-screen. Fact Joe. Cybertracker. 1994. In the pantheon of low-budget sci-fi action, Cybertracker sits somewhere between earnest ambition and straight-to-video chaos. A cyborg enforcer, a corrupt government, and Don the Dragon Wilson as a lone wolf hacker, it's RoboCop on clearance. But unlike its tech-obsessed premise, the company that distributed Cybertracker had no digital footprint. Action International Pictures was listed in bold on the box. Yet the trail ended there. No verified registry, no company tax ID, no confirmation of studio staff or producers. And strangely, some early press materials showed a different company name entirely before being swapped out post-production. Film sleuths believe Action International Pictures was used as a smokescreen created for the purpose of international rights negotiation. In this era, foreign buyers often demanded a studio name to lend legitimacy. What they got was an invented brand with no ties to the film's production crew. Ironically, Cybertracker spawned a sequel, Cybertracker 2, which was released under a different company name, suggesting even the fake studio didn't want to stick around. It's poetic, in a way. A movie about artificial intelligence distributed by an artificial company. Fact, sure. Deadly Bet, 1992. In the early 90 seconds, Las Vegas-based action thrillers were having a moment, and Deadly Bet leaned into that trend with grim determination. A down-on-his-luck gambler, brutal underground fights, and a time-is-running-out countdown formed the core of this overlooked film. But what slipped under everyone's radar was its distributor, Mainline Releasing, a company with no past, no future, and no identity. Unlike other phantom studios that left behind faint traces, Mainline Releasing existed nowhere in public databases, trade directories, or copyright filings. Even insiders who worked on the film later admitted they had never heard of the name before seeing it on the VHS packaging. Speculation grew. Some believed Mainline was a single-use label created to funnel a failed acquisition through foreign territories. Others claimed it was a tax-related maneuver, designed to distance the real producer from a product that had spiraled over budget and off schedule. What's most unsettling is that Mainline's name shows up on bootlegs in multiple countries, each time slightly altered. Mainline Pictures, Mainline Intel, or just ML Releasing. It created a fog of confusion, making it hard to trace distribution lines or royalties. Which may have been the point. Deadly Bet wasn't just about risks at the card table. Its real gamble was releasing under a label designed to disappear. Fact, 11, Jungle Ground. 1995. Jungle Ground is the kind of film where the title promises more than the budget delivers. Starring a pre-Highlander Donald Logue, the film is a dystopian urban warzone fantasy disguised as a gangland cop thriller. It was violent, chaotic, and just absurd enough to find a cult following. But the true weirdness came after the credits rolled. The distributor? North Star Home Video. Sounds familiar because it is. North Star was a real Canadian company, except the version on Jungle Ground wasn't. The logo was off. The font was different. And most notably, there were no public records of North Star ever handling this title. What's more, the version of the film circulating in European markets listed a different distributor, entirely suggesting multiple rebrands across territories, with none of them being verifiable. The working theory is that the Jungle Ground producers used an expired studio name, reviving a defunct brand to leverage credibility. It wasn't illegal, just murky. And in the mid-90 seconds, murky was good enough. In some copies, the North Star logo fades in and out with no accompanying contact info, no legal disclaimer, no all rights reserved. Just an empty shell of a company slapped onto a tape. The real jungle wasn't in the film. It was in the paper trail. Fact, Shiar. Maximum Force. 1992. Maximum Force wanted to be the Expendables before the Expendables existed. A group of renegade cops, each with their own style, team up to take down a ruthless crime boss. Sounds simple. Sounds promising. But it didn't get the release it deserved. Instead, it was pushed out quietly by a ghost label, Prism Pictures. To be clear, not Prism Entertainment, the known company with a real filmography. Prism Pictures was something else entirely. It used a similar logo, similar name, and operated just long enough to distribute Maximum Force to select VHS markets. But try to find a corporate listing? Nothing. No federal ID, no address, no interviews. Even Prism Entertainment's legal team reportedly had no knowledge of this alternate entity, prompting whispers of intentional name confusion, a tactic to give a dying product an artificial aura of legitimacy. Sources close to the production revealed the film had been shopped to multiple distributors before being taken over by an anonymous team that handled marketing, packaging, and international rights, all under the borrowed name. In the end, Maximum Force became a textbook example of label laundering when your movie isn't marketable enough for a real brand, so you make one up that almost sounds like one. It's fitting. The movie was about faking authority. So was the studio. Fact, 13. Recoil, 1998. Recoil had all the makings of a post-Heat, late, 90 seconds action B-movie. Gary Daniels again, car chases through downtown L.A., vengeance plots, and a few surprisingly sharp shootouts. But for all its polished grit, it quietly slipped into video stores under a name no one could trace. UAV, Home Video. At first glance, UAV sounded like a startup studio. The acronym gave it a corporate air, and the packaging looked standard. But the company itself? Another ghost. Records show UAV never had a formal registration as a film distributor. The address listed on the back of the VHS pointed to a warehouse that had been abandoned 2 years prior. No working phone number. No press materials. No trail. Digging deeper, collectors discovered that Recoil had originally been pitched to a small but real company, which backed out late in post-production due to legal concerns about the film's content and contractual disputes over music rights. To get the film out and recover costs, the producers allegedly formed a placeholder label to push it into the market before the year ended. The irony? Recoil actually performed decently in niche markets, but when fans started asking who distributed it, no one could give a straight answer. It's a film about someone coming back from the dead, and it was released by a company that never existed in the first place. Fact Hasson 4. Fist of Glory. 1991. If you blinked, you missed Fist of Glory. One of the many martial arts films born from the late 80 seconds boom. It had sweat, grunts, and tournament violence in spades. Shot in Southeast Asia with a mixed Western and Filipino cast, it was supposed to launch a new action franchise. Instead, it became a cautionary tale in distribution obfuscation. The credited distributor was Global Vision Limited. The logo was flashy. The name sounded international. But here's the twist. No studio by that name had ever registered in the country of release or any other. Worse, tapes released in Australia bore a different logo, GV Films, while the UK version carried only the initials GV in plain Helvetica text. New address, new legal information, new branding consistency. The prevailing theory among industry veterans is that Global Vision was an export shell, a made-up company created to sell one film at various regional markets under different identities. It worked like a passport scam. Same face, different name depending on which customs officer is looking. The film itself is rough, over-edited, and strangely dubbed, leading some to believe it was patched together from multiple abandoned projects. A Frankenstein's monster of fight scenes. In the end, Fist of Glory didn't just hide behind a fake studio. It hid behind 3, none of which left a trace. The Fact Hasson 5. Blood Fist 8. Trained to Kill. 1996. Yes, there were 8 Blood Fist films. And yes, this one tried to end the saga with a bang. Don the Dragon Wilson returned for another round of vengeance, this time with espionage elements and a darker tone. But after years of steady releases under Concord Pictures, Bloodfist VIII took an unexpected turn. The company listed on the cover? Ares Films International. A newcomer. A blank slate. A company that, for all practical purposes, should not have had access to the franchise. Why the sudden shift? Sources close to the production revealed that Bloodfist VIII was caught in a behind-the-scenes legal tangle. Licensing issues, expired contracts, and a merger between distribution partners created a gap, one that left the rights dangling in limbo. To avoid further delay, a stand-in studio was created, Ares Films. It was never meant to last, just to serve as a bridge for this one title, and it shows. The credits are messy, the marketing inconsistent. Some releases even have the old Concord logo, clumsily edited out or overlaid. Ares Films never distributed another movie. No website, no staff, no future. It's the cinematic equivalent of an alias used once and then burned. Bonus fact: Shadow Warriors. U.S. Strike Force. 1990. This one didn't make the top 15, but it might just be the strangest of all. Shadow Warriors. U.S. Strike Force was never meant to be a theatrical release. It was a stitched-together action reel, part military training video, part propaganda, part fever dream. Shot on outdated film stock with recycled explosion footage and overdubbed dialogue, the movie had no clear plot, and seemingly no audience. And yet, it was released. The name on the box? Eagle Star Releasing. Patriotic. Strong. Totally fake. What made Eagle Star truly bizarre wasn't just its non-existence in public records, it was that no one in the production team seemed to know who submitted the film for distribution. Actors believed it was an internal military promo. Editors thought it was a student thesis. Some believed it was meant for a weapons expo, never public consumption. But somewhere along the way, someone pressed it to VHS. Someone printed covers. Someone uploaded it to obscure European markets where it was shelved between Delta Force ripoffs and Chuck Norris knockoffs. And then nothing. No trace of Eagle Star ever again. What remains is a surreal artifact, a half-film, half-fake, released by a company that may have never even existed on paper. It's not just a fake studio, it may be a fake film. In a countdown filled with vanishings, aliases, and labels designed to disappear, Shadow Warriors stands alone, less like a movie, and more like a whispered rumor someone accidentally pressed record on. What do you think, were these fake studios just harmless shells or calculated smokescreens? In an industry built on illusion, sometimes the biggest lies aren't on screen, they're stamped on the credits. Which of these films surprised you the most? And have you ever watched a movie and thought, wait, who really made this? Tell us the strangest label you've ever seen on a VHS or DVD box. Because sometimes, the real story isn't in the plot. It's in the fine print.